to take it in and then let it out. One more time. I am so grateful and in awe. 50 years, of this struggle. And I was, when I came in the room, I thought, I'm not sure what I am needing to say today. But I am reminded of where I came from. And I'll speak again from the I. As a young person, I came into my community, through my family, through the intimacy, of my own family's. Como I wanted to begin, soy hija desobediente, nacida de hija desobediente, nacida de madre desobediente. My daughter, who works with children, was talking to me about oppositional defiance disorder. And I think, yeah, we have a lot of names for things that have been true for many of us sitting in this room. My tia, at this moment, lies in her bed dying because she is in opposition to where her children have placed her. And she is not willing to live in that way. And they cannot hear that she is not in the process of dying. She's in the process of resisting a life that is not true to her. And this is how we have been living. Us, all of us who remember who we are and where we come from, our values and our expectations. So yes, soy hija desobediente. I'm grateful to you for the palabra that reminds me of our política, because it has gone missing so much in our everyday experience. I've been saying for years that when the storefronts went missing in our communities, we all went missing as we went into the buildings. I had a dream once that I was coming through the mountains, the dry desert mountains, with a lot of folks with me in struggle. And as we came to the top, we looked over and we saw these turquoise pools of water. And all of us ran to jump into the pools. But somehow I paused because I saw these horses running. And it reminded me that water is sacred. And as folks began to run into the water, I walked around the pools and I saw in the pools all of these silver and turquoise and other stones and things that were surrounding the pool. And as I thought about what it meant, those sacred things, I heard the bell ring. And everybody ran inside the building. And I was the last to run in because my little daughter was with me and I had to pick her up. And in doing so, by the time I got to the door, everybody was in a classroom, sitting in chairs, staring forward at the teacher. And I was blessed to see that in my dream. And so I want to say thank you to all of those, Bert Corona especially, for having the faith in young people and putting us to work and expecting us to excel. Those places that I grew up in Sacramento, in the Folsom Prison Strike offices, and in all of those organizing spots of 10 people, 5 people, 20 people, all the culture centers that I have grown up in and come through, all the places in which I met the maestros that invited me to the ceremonies, the elders, as you say, Patricia, that, put us to work and then watched and said, yes, we want you around because, you know how to sweep. All those places have gone missing over these years as we sit in our classrooms and we talk about, the projects that we do in community. We are service people now. We do service in community, and we confuse ourselves because we think that we are providing, when in fact, if we were to pay attention, we would realize what it is that we are learning, how to be in our community again. Because it isn't just, I look at the thousands of people and I'm so grateful. I'm a really bad person when it comes to demonstrations because I don't have a very loud voice. I don't. My body just has to be present. But when it really comes down to it, I've been asking myself, not you, but me, what do I do every day I wake up? Every day I wake up and I say it's the same until it isn't. It's the same until it isn't. And here we are, and it isn't. And where are we, and what are we doing? What are we doing in community every day? Not just at the demonstrations, but every day. What is our work? And we try to do it where we are. I found myself in fear recently. In fear. Like, can I do this? Can I go to Cuba? I asked my friends. What'll happen if I go? Can I get back in? And Imawat says, well, if you come to Mexico, we'll go get you. Great relief. But I felt that fear. And I said, do I turn away from everything I've believed in all my life? And what I came to say is, as we practice who we are, I think of it as a Chicana, indigenous politica, and I agree that all of the ways that we talk are so difficult, and maybe we're just the chi people. Somos la gente del chi. X. I think about making things visible, and I thank you so much for making things visible and then ordering it and reminding us of where we're supposed to be standing and how it is that we defend ourselves. When we watch Gaza, when we watch Palestine, why? Because we realize we're watching what happened to us. But I want you to be proud of the fact that that happened to us, not just 500 years ago, but 200 and 100 and yesterday. And today someone is walking, being pushed out of their pueblo. In the last discussion at the Enlace de Mujeres Indígenas, the mujeres began to talk about how their young people were leaving the community because there was nothing for them there. And the repression that was coming and hitting those same young people, and the losses, the economic conditions that caused their families to break apart and fragment, and how that left everybody endangered. And here, what is it? 15 years later, here we are. But it has been happening. And so making things visible is seeing it amongst ourselves. Here we are. My family, that was my first project was, how did I wind up in Sacramento with the grandmother? Who was my father? My mother died so young of cancer. Cancer's been pursuing my family since I was a young person. It finally got me. And here I stand, having to give up a part of myself, right? Because I choose to do work, not live to get better. But in living, I have to live better. And so I thank you, Patricia, for the organization of how it is we need to be, what we need to use every day in our lives. And how we need to then also make that transparent. Because when I say making things visible, it is the medicina that aids the process of recovery from trauma, and we are all recovering from trauma, whether it was yesterday or the 500 years that we still remember in our bodies. And we act as if remembering was just, a casual feat. When remembering causes us to go through our trauma, there's no way to get through it but through it. And we open it up, and we open it up in our families, we open it up in our communities, and somehow if we do it, then we become part again of our own bodies, and we become part again of our families, and our families come with us, and we don't leave them behind as if they don't belong in history with us, as we're always looking forward instead of looking who's beside us and who's behind us. That remembering then puts us back into our communities. And it's not an easy thing to say, I reclaim who I am, because with or without womb, I have a connection to this mother, esta tierra madre, and I remember who I am, and that's what I want to come back to. As we see what's happening in Gaza, this concerted effort to erase the people, then look around and say, you remember who you are. That's the homework I want to leave with you. Remembering who we are. Remembering who to be loyal to. Nuestras madres that worked their asses off and way, way beyond my age, laboring so that we could sit here. Our communities that have done everything possible for us to be a part. Re-embodiment, I think, is something that is most difficult in these times. And I want to not kind of glance over it, but we have been engaged in a pinche pedo, that is ridiculous. Que yo nací y que tengo pueblo, and I can prove the 4 points. I can go home and people recognize me. I have a language that I can speak. I have a tradition. And what do you have? Well, I brought my traditional clothes today. I've been doing a lot of research, and I came back to the penitence. I used to buy them for my tío when I was a kid, and I couldn't understand why he didn't wear them. Now I realize I was really liking them for me. Here I am. We are many pueblos, but I'm not sure if we're unidos. And for all of us indigenous people, for all of us who identify as indigenous people, it's in our heart, our corazón, and somebody said a while back ago that we don't have the right to pray because we don't have the connection. Pues dile eso a mi abuela. Go home and tell her. Because, I found her prayers when she passed, She was, like an independent, I'm telling you, in opposition toda su vida, con su altarcito que tenía siempre. And then her friend, who was always doing great favors for her, wanted to convert her to Jehovah's Witness. She kept saying, I can't give up my Virgencita. But in the end, being polite and said, ay, mija, mira, me ayudó 20 años. And so she converted to Jehovah's Witness. But when she passed, I found her whole altar in the drawer. I opened it up, and there were her prayers, little bundles. And so I put those on my altar, and now I have probably a 70-year-old prayer. What are those prayers for? The intimacy of our lives. As you speak of the macro, the things that we need to do, we also have to think about the micro. What do we need to do that work that we need to do? We're so askance of sacrifice. But the folks that brought me into this world sacrificed. The Chicano Studies program was a sacrifice. Many people gave up their own careers, gave up their own dreams to fight a battle to get us into the classroom. And, as I tell my students when they say, what? We have a test, we can't walk out. I say, your sacrifice is the anxiety that you're going to carry as you stand out there on that picket line and just hold it, because it's going to be all right. Our homework is remembering ourselves as a people who remember. At the UN, as we go as La Red Chicana Indígena, we have sat in many places with many people, indigenous people from all over the world. Yes, because they're from all over the world, not just from here. That was a reckoning, También hay blonde indígenas, from the northern territories. If you ever wonder why Santa Claus, gives away things, it's because he's Sami. We're always proving our value, by being able to give. Pero when we sit there and we realize, as Chicanas, people say to us, man, we respect the fact that you remember. How have you held on through all this time, through every from buyouts to assimilations to appropriations. And we're using that language against ourselves now. Asking ourselves, what right do we have to be human beings? What right do we have to stand up and say, I remember and I have loyalty to my pueblos, I have loyalty to this mother, I have relationships to all that lives. And I want to leave you lastly with the original instructions as they've been said, the golden rule. They're not the 10 commandments that tell us how to behave, and I wish those people that, tout them all the time would actually practice them. Our directions are much more simpler. The Creator said, live in harmony with this creation. And remember, it is a finite creation. Honor it, respect it, and be happy. How do you be happy? What are the instructions for happiness? Live within what's whole. You don't need that, not too much that, and figure out how to protect the waters and how to protect the earth and how to, as you were saying, what's the one thing that you can do? And I want you to think about that right now for your homework. What is the one thing that you can do? What do you commit to for the rest of your life to do? And if you can bring that into your own self, right, and begin that practice, then you can handle the micro. Because we have to work within and without if we're going to survive. If we're dealing with all of this bullshit as we're dealing with in the large, right, as we're being cut and we're, it's affecting my family in the micro. My children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren who are trying to school, my great-grandchildren, who have their own issues, who have, their challenges, the elders and their medicines and all of it's in my home. So what is it that we do? We go home and we do. We go home and we work, we go home and we create, we go home and show up every day, and really working in community is not that glorious. It is hard work. But if we can establish relationship, I don't mean come in and preach, and I don't come in and lecture, but come in and get to work and pay attention and figure out, what needs to be done, like many of you already do. Because I look around the room and I say, I can see the folks that do. But all of us young folks, I include myself there. Take up some work. Pick up a broom. Brooms are good, they're safer.
Really work.
Bueno. That's about as much energy as I have today.
So I am overwhelmed with, I got emotional listening to everybody, and we're just very overwhelmed with all of the teachings that we're receiving this morning. So I want to give another round of applause and thank our panelists for tonight. But I'd like to open it up for, I thought about, I've been taking notes and thinking about kind of summarizing, but I really want to give time for folks to also have conversations. I'd like to open it up for some Q&A. Okay, do we have a board member here? Oh, thanks, Michelle. Can you pass the mic?
Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to just be here to hear all of you. I've learned so much from each of you. I took as many notes as I could. My name is Maria Elena Fernandez. I teach at Cal State Northridge in Chicana Studies Department. I guess I want to say that I really appreciate this conversation so much about all the, I'm not sure the language that you used, Dr. said, but all the ways in which our indigeneity and all the multiple experiences of it, named, unnamed, and how, de-indigenized mestizos, I'm certainly one of them. I guess I want to say that I'm very sympathetic to my Zapotec colleagues and students, colleagues in particular who are, they've been harshly criticized our field, and yet this is, we whole need a whole other session for this, but one of the criticisms, I'll say first that I don't appreciate that they don't have empathy for us and the violence that our ancestors went through that led us to become de-indigenized. And so we are, those of us who don't know who our specific ancestry is, except to Google who are the indigenous people of, southwestern Hidalgo, which would be my case, whatever everybody's regional origins is. So I'll say that. But I do have empathy for their, when they did grow up in those traditions, and those of us who didn't, I do acknowledge that those differences. The main thing I think it would be good for us to have this conversation about Aztlán, because there's been a big critique that I've heard from my colleagues, one in particular about Aztlán, and that we really need to put Aztlán in the context of, which we do, I think most of us do, of a mythical homeland and not an actual homeland, because their argument is that we are erasing the actual native people of these lands. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I hope that we have a conversation about that at some point in our field.